Why is it an insular habitat? As David mentioned, it's an oasis, and basically it's very rare to have in a semi-arid environment like it's a pre-desert environment like it is in south of Spain in Almeria. It's very rare to actually have an oasis of green, which is provided by the river. And that, for us, was the oasis effect, and that's why this insular habitat effect applies. And in our case, having the humidity from the water allows for the presence of many habitats and species that are dependent on water. So if the river dries up, then basically we're looking at extinction. Other elements as well, gypsum, obviously, that's why the park was designated Natura 2000 site, is because it's largely composed of gypsum, and it's a very unique habitat. Most plants are toxic, gypsum is toxic to most plants, but gypsophyte species, such as the ones we meet here, thrive in this type of soil and are abundant in the area, so it's quite a unique habitat. Wildlife corridors and habitat fragmentations. We looked at that as well. We walked the length of the river, and you can see an example of a wildlife corridor. The green in the middle by the river, that's a wildlife corridor, and habitat fragmentation everywhere around that corridor, the roads and the agriculture around it, that's basically habitat fragmentation. We walked the river, so the study lasted for about 1.5 years, in which we looked at most of the river, and although in official documents the river is stated as permanently, with a permanent water flow throughout the year, what we noticed in our walks that it's no longer permanent. There is no water for about half of the previous flow of the river. The water is being sucked up through the natural system, but the river still doesn't flow naturally anymore. Conservation status of the river, there's a lot of issues in there, because it's not just lack of water, it's also environmental pollution, it's fragmentation, and it's in both natural sites. It's one site called Paraje Natural Castellieso, and then there's another one called Sierra Cabrera Vendar, and both sites are in a bad state, both in terms of water pollution and in terms of the quantity of water. Some sort of a man-made anthropogenic creation. It looks like it's full of life, but it's artificially irrigated, and that's where most of the aquifer that has been, that's most of the water from the underground goes inside these massive plantations. And despite having an issue with water exploitation, there's been no measurements from the authorities of the river levels, no controls of boreholes extractions, no monitoring of water flow, or no limitation on the rights of industrial owners on the amount of water that they can extract. So habitats, we looked at how habitats are being affected by the lack of water. We looked at the habitats present, and there were like 17 out of the 17 habitats present in the park under Natura 2000, not one of them was in a favorable condition. It's a micro habitat, it only occurs in 1 hectare, so it's something very small and very easily to protect if you have the intention of protecting it. There's other smaller habitats. This is basically small shrubs, pre-desert shrubs, and they're affected as well. There's only 49 Natura 2000 sites in Europe that have this type of habitat, and Spain is the one with the most abundant. So it's quite a rare habitat at European level. We looked at other species like the spurtite tortoise. This is an emblematic species for Europe as a whole, because it's quite rare, the Testuga greca, and it's considered vulnerable in Europe, and it's in danger of extinction in Andalusia. We found a lot of species that were not included in the report. There was about 26 species that were not included in the management of the park. We found a lot of threats in terms of intensive agriculture with red, non-intensive agriculture with green, and mining. You can see the blue areas are where all the mines are based around the park. Climate change. We also looked at the possible effects of climate change on this. And it's a bit of a laboratory what's happening in southern Spain, because if this river goes, it will basically amplify the effects of climate change, which is already, for Spain as a location, it will be one of the worst hit area by climate change. If water extraction is lowered, and if it's monitored, then it's possible to stabilize this ecocide before it finishes. So, and here is where the European Union should go in, because it has introduced some strong environmental legislation, but it's not being applied in the area. And in this case, actually, the European Union was a negative factor because it paid for infrastructure, for roads, for the olive plantations, sometimes through agricultural subsidies. So it's kind of working against its own European environmental standards. Thank you.